will be a star freelancer. Learn new skills. Set your goals. Increase your skills. Browse over 100 plus videos and ebooks. Jump to starfreelancer.eu.
Hi everyone, welcome back. So in the last lecture we covered functions and actually using a for loop in a function, so pretty solid stuff. And in this lecture I just want to touch on classes. Now the way we're going to work with classes is quite theoretical, and I couldn't really find an appropriate example to apply to this project, so we're just going to cover other examples of classes. So I'm just going to head to our lecture notes, and there should be a section called classes in your lecture notes. Okay, so basically what is a class in Python? So functions generally represent general calculations or formula in your script, right? We've worked with functions before. We know that we create a function which is just a combination of calculations and algorithms, and we can call that function multiple times in our script. Classes are similar to functions, however classes are for representing things, right? And I'll chat about the instances in a second, but classes are for representing things, and classes are used to define the operations. So, for example, if your application needs to keep track of people and the behavior, then something like person will be a class, all right? And person will be the class, and it will show you sort of like a map of what you need to track someone. So for example, like person can consist of, it will tell you, okay, you need an email address, you need the person's name and surname, you need their identity or social security number. Okay, so that's what a class is. I'm not talking about the actual data, it's more of a map, right? So based on that, we know that a class is a blueprint. Like I said, it's a map for something, or for how something should be defined. It doesn't actually contain any data. So something like a car class will specify, hey, you need a car name, you need a car make, but it won't have the necessary data in it. So it won't say, hey, the car is a G-class Mercedes. Sorry, I'm terrible at cars. But it won't have the data, it will just have what you need. Okay, so while the class is a blueprint, an instance is an object that is bought from the class, okay, and it contains real data. So when we say instance, we mean the actual real data within a class, right? So an instance of the car class is not a blueprint, it's not a map, it's actually the data. So an instance of the car class will be something like a Ford F-150 or a Ford Mustang. Okay. So if we put it another way, think of a class like a form or questionnaire, right? So that's a class. It's a form that you get and that you need to fill in. There's no data in there, but it tells you what we need to fill in. Whereas an instance is a form that has the information in. Okay. All right. And again, I've summarized, a class is a blueprint and an instance of a class is an actual data. Now I'm adding the theory in because as you learn a bit more Python, these words do show up, and it's just nice to have a bit of background into what they exactly mean. Okay, so I think with that, why don't we just start playing around with classes? So let's go to Spider. Okay. And you have two options here. You can either play around with classes in your blogme.py file, or if you want, you can go to Intro to Python, which is the first project we done, and you can just write the script here. Okay, I am going to do it on the Intro to Python, just because when we are going to be playing around with classes, we're not going to use actually any information from our blogme.py file. So if you're going to do the same, then just make sure you save your blogme.py file. Okay, and with Spider it's so easy, you just switch between tabs. So if you haven't opened Intro to Python, then go ahead and open it here. So you just click Open File, and then you can get directed to your intro to Python file. Okay, so if I go to open file here, and I'm going to go to my file where I saved intro to Python. So it should be that same working directory we've been saving things. Okay, and you can click open. Then, as always, whenever you switch between files, we need to make sure that our working directory is the same. So let's just make sure. So I'll click open and just go to the same working directory we've always been working with. So my one is data, and click open. Okay, then just to note, whenever you have to restart Spider and Anaconda, just always make sure that your working directory is the same directory where your data is stored. Okay, perfect. All right. So in the intro to Python file, let's just start playing around with classes. Okay. So how do we define a class? So with Python, it's quite easy. We just say class, space, and your class name. So we've been using that car class example, so let's just do that. So you say class space car, or whatever class name you want, and then obviously a colon. Okay, so quite similar to how we've defined functions. So with functions, remember you started with a define and the function name and colon. Here we call a class, or we define a class by saying class, space, the class name, and then colon. Okay. And then if you enter, and you can just say anything here, so I'm just going to say pass. So this just doesn't really do much. So if you want to try and run it, so just select the two lines and run that selection. Okay, you can see nothing happens. Alright, so this car class isn't really interesting now. Let's spruce it up a bit. Let's add some properties, like that car name and car make, which is what I've been talking about. So let's do that. Alright, so how do we do that? So firstly, quite similar to how we've been doing functions is that Python needs us. Our Python needs to know what it should input, or what we should input into it. And to do that, we have the define function there, right? So the define function can help us because it can tell us what we need to input. So it's def, and let's put some parameters in there. So let's put name and make. Okay. So we've defined the parameters name and make, and we're going to put a colon, because what are we going to do with name and make? We can say something like, so the user is going to input a name, they're going to input a make, and then we're going to say something like maybe car name is equal to the name. So we create a variable called car name. It's going to equal to name, or whatever the name the user inputs, and then we're going to say car make is equal to make, and this is whatever the make the user inputs. Okay, so what's happening here? We know that there might possibly be an error because there's that cross sign, so let's check it out. So select everything and run it. Okay. So it's saying something's missing. There's an invalid syntax. Basically, it's just saying, D, what exactly are you doing? What we need to do here is we need to set the initial state of the class. All right. And this is just a formatting thing that you do for classes. So that's what we're going to do. So how do we set the initial state? Well, there's two things we need to do when we create a class. First, we need to make sure we initialize it. So in between def and your name make, I want you to say underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Okay, and this, all this underscore underscore init underscore underscore does is that it sets the initial state of the class. When you use init, you also have to use another variable called self. Okay, so we're going to say self, comma, name and make. Okay, and again, self is another standard notation that's used. It's the first argument always. So regardless of how many parameters you have, you must have self as the first argument, and refers to the object which will be created at a later stage, right? So generally and mostly all the time, if you have an initialize function, which we need to do with the class, self follows. Okay, and because self is the first argument, it needs to be here as well. Okay, so two things to remember for classes: when you create a class, right, and make sure it's you create it with a function class and the name. You then define the class, but remember the two things we need to do is initialize that class, and the first argument must always be self. Okay, and if we want to add other arguments, we can. So maybe we want to say something like color. Okay, so this is another argument. And again, here we need to say self.color, or let's just say car color is equal to color. Okay, so let's run it and see. Okay, awesome. So it runs, but nothing's happening, and you should know why nothing is happening currently, because, well, we didn't really call it. Right. So to go over it one more time, you call a class, right, by the function class and your class name. Classes have two things that we need to do. We need to initialize or set the initial state of the class, and we need to add the argument self, because self is basically the standard notation used in the first argument. Okay, and then this here, self car name, okay, creates the attribute called car name, and it assigns it to a value which is name in this case. Okay, and name would be something that the user inputs. All right, self.carMake creates an attribute called carMake. The value here is make, and make is what the user inputs. Okay, and then the similar thing for car color as well. Okay. So why don't we just call the class and see what happens? So let's do something like my car. Let's call that is equal to. Now let's call our car class. So that's car. And let's add some parameters. So you can see as soon as we say car, Python tells us, okay, so we want a name of the car, a make of the car, and a color. So I am going to say it is G class, comma, Mercedes, comma, and color is black. Okay, and now let's highlight everything and let's run it. Okay, you can see my car comes up. It's saying the type is a car because that's our class. And now it should have the values or the attributes in there, right? So what do? How do we call that? So let's say something like, or maybe let's go to a console. And let's say something like my car dot car name. Okay, and we can see G class comes up there. And if we say my car.car color, black comes there, right? So, okay, so for attributes in a class, we can say something like car name is equal to my car dot, and you can see it shows up, so it shows up the 3 attributes it has. So we're going to say car name. Okay, and let's select that and let's run it. Okay, and you can see variable gets created, which is car name, and G class comes up. Let's try another one. So let's just say car make is equal to my car dot car make. And let's do one more, which is car color is equal to my car dot car color. And let's run these and run the selection. Okay, and now we have those 3 attributes coming through. Okay, so these 3 attributes here in your class are actually called instance attributes. Okay, so instance attributes. So all of these are called instance attributes. Okay, and remember, instance means the actual data. And then you may hear something called class attributes, right? And class attributes are just attributes that have the same value regardless of your instance. So a class attribute would be something like, okay, and class attributes, because it has the same value regardless of your instance attributes, doesn't really affect your define function, okay, because the user doesn't need to enter name, make, or color for your class attributes. So let's just say something like a class attribute would be something like type is equal to automobile. Okay, so that's what I mean by class attribute. So regardless of, I'm just going to add class attributes here, regardless of whatever your user inputs, so the name, make, and color of any car, it's always going to be an automobile. And that's the difference between class attributes and instance attributes. So class attributes won't really affect what your user inputs. It applies universally within the class. Instance attributes actually depend on what your user inputs. Okay, and instance attributes will be within the define function. So you can see by the indent that these are all within the define function, whereas a class attribute is out of it. Okay, so let's just save this intro to Python. This is saved. I will end the lecture, and in the next lecture we will do some sentiment analysis. So I'll see you then. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome back to this lecture. So in this lecture we are going to do some sentiment analysis on Python, which is quite cool. And I think we should just get to it. So before we start the sentiment analysis, there's one thing I want us to do, is that remember that when we are running this and when we were testing for loops for blogme.py, the first for loop here gave us an error because one of the rows for the title was null or nan. So I just want us to comment this out so that we don't need to continuously, every time we run this file, it's going to give us an error. I wanted it commented out so we can just pass it. So let's select this for loop. So it's a for loop just before the define keyword function. When you select it, press edit and say comment or uncomment. Okay, All right, so now I think we can move on to sentiment analysis. Just make sure that you save your file. All right, and let's chat a bit about sentiment analysis. So sentiment analysis, which is also called opinion mining, is really the subfield in natural language processing. And it tries to identify and extract opinions within a given text. So the aim of sentiment analysis is usually to gauge the attitude and sentiments of the speaker based on the computational algorithm or treatment of the specific text. Now, sentiment analysis is not always accurate because understanding human emotions when we are sarcastic people and even through text is actually quite hard. So a lot of the sentiment analysis algorithms, models, and libraries may not always be accurate, but we can get close to it. So for this project, we will be using Vader as a sentiment analysis. And let's just find out a bit more about Vader. So I am going to jump to our lecture slides. Okay, so like I said, in this project, we're going to be using Vader. And Vader is a rule-based sentiment analysis that is specifically attuned to sentiments expressed in social media. And Vader uses a combination of a sentiment lexicon, which is a list of lexical features such as words which are generally labeled according to their semantic orientation as either positive or negative. So this is just a fancy way of saying Vader has been trained on social media data, and the Vader sentiment analysis determines if a sentiment is classed as negative, positive, or neutral. Vader has been found to be quite successful in dealing with social media text, NY Times editorials, movie reviews, and product reviews. This is because Vader not only tells us about the positivity and negativity score, but how positive or negative a sentiment is. It's also fully open sourced under the MIT license. Now, some advantages of using Vader. So Vader does have a lot of advantages over your traditional methods of sentiment analysis. Like I said, it works really well with social media type text and also across any other projects, but it's been training and learning on social media type text. It also doesn't require any training data because, like I said, it has been trained on social media text, so we don't need to train Vader to get used to our data. It's already quite used to social media data, which is perfect. Okay, with that being said, let's install Vader. So we are going to use the Vader library on Python. And remember, we need to install a library using PIP. So if you are a Windows user, you can go to conda prompt and the conda prompt and make sure you run as administrator if possible. So just right click the icon and say run as administrator and open up the prompt. If you're a Mac user, you're going to open up terminal. So just search for terminal and open it up. Okay, and on conda prompt or on terminal, I want you to type pip space install. And it's VADER, all small letters and then a capital S and sentiment. So like that. And press enter. Okay. Once you installed it, we can move back to Spider. Okay. So I'm just going to rerun the file because I haven't run it in a while. And the first thing what we need to do is we need to install or import Vader sentiment. So let's scroll up by where we usually have our import libraries. And there's a specific class in Vader sentiment that I want to use. Right. So just below import pandas, I want you to say from Vader sentiment, and you can see Python already knows that we want this. Okay, dot Veda sentiment. Okay, so from this, I want you to import something called sentiment here, intensity analyzer. So like I said, Veda sentiment has a few. So there's senti text, but I want sentiment intensity analyzer. Okay, and let's select that and run it. So remember, every time we import a library, we need to actually run it so we can use it. And then I just want you to copy this. So sentiment intensity analyzer, just copy that. So Command or Control C, and scroll right to the bottom. Okay, and on a new line, say hashtag and Command V. And the first thing we need to do is actually initialize the sentiment analyzer. So let's call the variable sentiment, or SENT underscore INT is equal to, and I want you to paste again and have round brackets. Okay, and this just initializes the class. So once we initialize it, we can actually use it to test it out on a few data titles. So why don't we just have a look and see? So let's go to a data file. And I want to do the sentiment analysis on title, all right? Just because that there, I feel like the sentences are short enough, but descriptive enough for us to get good sentiment. So let's do the sentiment analysis on, let's just do it on this number 15, okay, which is a Putney child murder suspect detained by police. Just because it is quite negative. So let's just see if Veda actually analyzes this and tells us that this is a negative sentiment. Okay, so this is data, title column, and index number 15. So I'm going to close that. And let's create a variable called text. And let's say equals, and now we want data, square brackets, quotation marks, title. Okay, and index number 15. Okay. Let's run this. So let's run both actually. So let's run sent int and text and run that selection. Okay. So here we go for our text variable. It's that Putney child murder. Now let's check the sentiment. So let's say sent is equal to, and we need to call this, which is sent int. And sent int, which is our sentiment intensity analyzer, actually has this class, this function called polarity scores. Okay, so I'm using that. And now we can say from our sentiment intensity analyzer, there's a function called polarity scores. What are we going to determine the scores on? We're going to determine it on text. So in the brackets, we can write text. And let's run this. Okay, awesome. And we see that sent is now created, all right, which should have our polarity scores. Let's just double check that. Awesome. So what do we have? Well, we have compound, negative, neutral, and positive. And straight away, we see negative is at 0.71. So basically 71% negative. Neutral is 29%. Positive is 0. So Veda is saying, hey, the text or the title about child murder is pretty negative. The compound, so the compound is just a sum of negative, neutral, and positive, and it's normalized. So a compound that is closer to -1 is negative, and a compound that is closer to 1 is positive. Okay, so all of this is telling us, hey, it's pretty negative. I'm only going to concentrate on negative, neutral, and positive values, because I think these columns would actually be quite cool to add into our data frame. You know, so per title, how much is it negative, how much is it neutral, and how much is it positive. Okay, so I wonder if we can maybe try something else again. So let's try another text. So let's look at data, and feel free to take a totally different title. You can choose any title. I think news articles are pretty negative as a baseline, but number 16, attack at school in China leaves at least 8 children dead. So let's have a look at this. That's obviously very negative. So I'm going to close that. And instead of 15, let's do 16. And let's select this and run the selection. So now text should be something about, yep, so text is attack at school in China. And let's have a look at sentiment. Okay, so now Veda is saying that negative is 45%, neutral is 55%, nothing about that text is positive, and also the compound again is more closer to -1, so it is swaying negatively. Great. Now, how do we extract the actual sentiment into fields of variables? So let's try this. Let's just say negative, or neg, is equal to cent, which is our dictionary. And remember, I said that dictionary keys are very similar to columns. We treat it the same. So square brackets and quotation marks, and let's just see what it's called. So I'm just double clicking on cent. Okay, so the key is called negative. So it's going to be neg. And let's run this. Okay, awesome. That's correct. So we have negative and it's 0.41. Let's do the same for positive. So POS is equal to SENT, square brackets, and let's just check what positive is called in the cent dictionary. POS, perfect. All right, so close quotation marks and POS. And then what do you think neutral will be called? Okay, so neutral, cent, square brackets, quotation, NEU. And let's just run these three. Okay, and now we have negative, neutral, and positive sentiment for this text. Pretty cool. Okay, so now in order for Veda to determine the sentiment of each title in our data frame, we're going to have to create our famous for loops, loop through every title, and extract the positive and negative and neutral scores. Okay, so because we're looping through every title, we know it's a for loop. So let's just decide how we're going to do this. So let's comment and say adding a for loop to extract sentiment per title. Okay, and maybe the columns we're going to create in our data frame will be title, neg, sentiment is equal to, and we'll leave it blank for now. And then let's do title, pos, sentiment is equal to, and we'll leave it blank. And then title, neutral, sentiment is equal to. So these are the 3 columns that we'll want added into a data frame, where they'll have the positive, negative, and neutral sentiment per title. So why don't we test it on 10 rows, right? So in our data frame, I've just double-clicked on the data variable explorer. I want to just test it on 10 titles, and let's see if we can create 3 different columns that tells us the sentiment per column. So let's just say for X in range and curly brackets 0, 10, colon. Okay, so just 10 titles. The text is equal to, so similar to this one here, but instead of 16, we're going to make it X, because X will be the position where Python will loop through every row. Okay, so we're going to say data, title, and square brackets X. Okay, so this gives us a text. Then remember, we also need to initialize the sentiment intensity analyzer. So I think what we can do is we can just copy this. So Command or Control C, and just paste it just below text. So make sure it's in the same line, and say Command V. And then just like here, once we initialize it, we need to determine the sentiment. So same thing, we're going to say sent is equal to sent int dot polarity scores and text. Okay, because now this will just be done on one X value. And then again, I also want these things, right? Because I want the negative, positive, and neutral values to be extracted just like that. Because what we can do is then we can append this negative to a column in our for loop. So we're going to say neg is equal to sent, square brackets, and neg. And then we can copy the pos and neutral. It's exactly the same. So just select all, Command or Control C, and enter, and just paste it. Again, just make sure it's all in one line. Okay. And now we can do our append, because we can say this column needs to append this neutral variable across every loop, right? So let's take that. So title neg sentiment, Command or Control C. Paste it here and say dot append, and we want neg to be appended. Okay, so through every loop we want Python to determine the negative, positive, and neutral. So let's just say negative is 0.3. It then creates this column, title neg sentiment, and adds in 0.3. The next loop, when it goes to x equals 1, so it goes to the first row, determines the negative, positive, and neutral in the first row. And let's just say the negative is 0.4. It will append after 0.3 in the last row, it will append 0.4. Okay, then we're going to do the same for positive. So copy title pos sentiment, Command or Control C, and paste it. Okay, so make sure everything's in line, because everything needs to be inside this for loop, and say dot append pos. And one more, which is title neutral sentiment, paste it here, dot append, and this is NEU. Okay, why don't we give this a run and let's see. So make sure you select everything right until title, neg, sentiment and below, and run the selection. Okay, awesome. So we should have created 3 columns, and we did. All right, so let's just open title, neg, sentiment. Okay, and in index 0, it's saying that the negative sentiment was 0.2. Index 1, it's saying the negative sentiment was 0.5, and so on. Perfect. Let's add in all rows. Okay, so as always, to add in all rows instead of the 10, let's replace that with the length of the data frame. So let's create a variable called length is equal to len of data. And instead of 10, we're now going to replace it with length. Let's run this, but ideally, to be honest, we're going to want some try and except here, just in case, again, the title, there might be a null title, and then Python will probably create an error because a blank title, it won't know what to do with it. But let's check it out. So again, from the title, neg, sentiment, select that and highlight down and just run the selection. Okay, so to give you an idea, it took about maybe 30 seconds to run, and then it gave me an error. Probably the same error we received in the last for loop. So yeah, exactly. So I think x equals 3181, and the text there was nan, it was null. So we're going to need tries and excepts. So let's do that. So I want Python to try this whole thing, or maybe until, yeah, so not the columns, but maybe to try this. And if it doesn't work, then we can just assign values of 0 for negative, positive, and neutral. So at the for loop, press enter and say try, colon. I want you to select from text to neu equals sent new, and press tab. So you can press tab, or you can either go edit and indent. Okay, so it's going to try this, and if it doesn't work, it will move to accept. So let's type in accept like that, and let's just say if this doesn't work, we can say neg is equal to 0, and pos can equal to 0, and neu can equal to 0. Okay, so we're saying Python, if you can try this here, if there's an issue, such as maybe the text is a nan value, then just assign the neg, pos, and neutral values as 0, and just append that to our title, neg, sentiment, our pos sentiment, and our neu or neutral sentiment columns. Okay, let's run and check it out. Okay, this might take a minute or two to run. Okay, so that took about 3 to 4 minutes for me. So it should take the same for you. But if we look at our columns, it looks like everything's good. We have 10,437 rows. That matches up with our initial data frame. Okay, and the last thing we want to do is, remember, I want to add these columns back to our data file. So we need to transform these to series, and then from series we can add them as a new column. So let's do that. So we're going to say that title neg sentiment is equal to pd.series, and in brackets, again, title neg sentiment. Okay, so let's select this and run this. Okay, and we can see title neg sentiment is now a series. Let's do the same for the other two. So you can pause the video and do exactly the same for the other two, and we'll go through it. Okay, so this is what I have. I have the title positive sentiment is equal to pd.series and our title pos sentiment. And then I have the title neutral sentiment is equal to pd.series and the title neutral sentiment. So if we run these, they should all be series now. Now we can add these back as columns. So to add them back as columns, I'm sure you're an expert in this by now. So our new column name, I'm just going to keep this name because it's pretty self-explanatory. So title neg sentiment is equal to, and we want this, title neg sentiment. Okay, and then we want data, square brackets, quotation marks, and it's copy title pos sentiment, Command or Control C when you select that, and paste it in between the quotation marks, is equal to title pos sentiment. And then a last, so data, square brackets, quotation marks, title neutral sentiment is equal to title neutral sentiment. Let's highlight this and let's run it. Okay, let's have a look at our data file and let's see if those new columns have been created. So I'm going to scroll to the end. Brilliant. So now we have negative, positive, and neutral sentiments per title. Amazing. Okay. And I think that's it. I think we've done quite a lot of cleaning. We've done the sentiment analysis here, which is the most important thing. I think we're ready to write our data. We can write it as an XLSX file. And we can store it. So let's comment here and say writing the data. So we're going to say data dot to Excel. Let's say open brackets, quotation marks, and let's call it blog me clean dot XLSX. I also want to show you a sheet name, so in case you do want a sheet name, so just say comma, space, and let's say sheet name is equal to, and let's call it blog me data, just so you can see how it looks. And do we need an index? So let me just open data there. There is an article ID which should represent a unique row, so we don't need an index. So I'm back here and let's say comma, index is equal to false. And let's run this. Perfect. Right. Once you're done, you can click save. And while we're here, let's do a full run just to make sure we don't have any errors. So let's clear our variables. You can say yes. And let's do one more run. So you can click on run. And this run will take a few minutes because remember, it needs to loop through to determine the sentiment, so just remember that. Okay, so that took about maybe 4 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes for me again. and it's ready. So the code runs properly. Make sure you save it. And I just want to open this Excel file because I want to show you the sheet name. Okay, so I'm in my data folder, and let's have a look for Blogamy Clean, and let's open it. Okay, and this is how it shows up. So quite neat. And we can see our columns are here, our new columns, and you can see the sheet name is now BlogMe Data. Great. Okay, and that is the Python section of the course done. I really hope you enjoyed it. Next lecture we're going to be doing all about Tableau, and where we will finally be visualizing these flat files that we have cleaned and transformed and performed sentiment analysis on by Python. We're going to be visualizing all the data across the 3 projects. So I'll see you then. Bye. Hi everyone. So I am just going to be reviewing our Bluebank loan dashboard. So this is what we are going to be building. So we learn how to do pie charts here using loans by interest type. We also learn how to do a histogram, and then our normal bar charts where they split, and we also learn how to create a calculated field and an if statement in Tableau, which is quite cool. We also play around with averages, max and mins, and as always we do link to our original Python script. Filters are here and they work. And the last thing I want to add is that we also allowed it for if the user wants to do further investigating, they can by having a look at the line level data. So if we select an interesting bar, so maybe having a look at loans that have a fair credit score, the dashboard filters, and a pop-up appears where we can click for more info. And it will then take us to a spreadsheet that the user can have a look at. And the user can see that row level data. And that's it for Bluebank. So quite a fun dashboard, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome back. So in this lecture, we are going to start our visualization for Bluebank loan analysis. So just to refresh our memories, I am going to read the project brief again. The project brief is in our lecture slides. It's also in the projectbrief.pfd file. Okay. Bluebank is a bank in USA that has a loan department which is currently understaffed. They supply loans to individuals and don't have much reporting on how risky these borrowers are. Using Python and Tableau, they'd like to see a report of borrowers who may have issues paying back the loan. Right, so with that being said, let's go to Tableau Public. Okay, so now if you remember correctly, when we were cleaning our data on Python, the Bluebank file was a text file, it was a .csv. Now there are some issues with that file, so I'm going to show you what we'll be doing. And I added the section in just because I think as a data analyst, you come across this issue quite often. So I just want to show you generally what data analysts do. So let's connect to the text file. So I want you to click on the text file at the connect section, and then navigate to your file. So Bluebank, I know we did loan_cleaned as the exported file, and select open. Okay, so now you should be familiar with this window. Tableau is telling us that we've connected loan cleaned. The table is here. And it's also showing us what other CSV files are in the folder. Now we notice that something looks wrong when we have a look at this data. Okay, and if you remember with the loan or the blue bank file, there were column names that had full stops, and I don't think Tableau actually likes that. So that's why you have some columns that are combined and the data is combined. So we actually need to do something. We need to clean the file. The best way to do this is we can make some quick fixes on Excel. So I want you to open the actual text file. Okay. So in the File Explorer, go to the original text file and open it on Excel. Okay. And now I can notice already what's wrong. So like I said, Tableau doesn't like columns that use full stops or periods. So that's probably the main issue. So to fix it, what we can do is we can select this A column and go to Data, and then you can go to the Text to Columns. Now we just want to separate this from comma separated to just out into your normal table format. So click on Delimited, go to Next, make sure the delimiter is a comma, and you can click Finish. All right, so this looks a bit better. And first things first, there's no column name here, so let's add that. And then I want to get rid of the full stops and add underscores. So select the column names only, and then I want you to hit Command or Control F, and then you'll see the search toolbar expand, and click on the search icon and say replace. And we are going to replace all the full stops or periods with underscores. Okay, and then hit replace all and OK. And close it. Now you can see all your columns have underscores. Okay, and then let's make sure we save this. So I'll say File and Save and close it. And close it. Now let's try refreshing the data. So this is the refresh sign. We're back in Tableau Public, and let's try and refresh it. It's going to give you a warning saying, hey, if you changed anything, you might replace important data, which is fine. Click yes. Okay. And then remove this and bring it back in. All right, and now we can see it's looking a lot better. So what we did is we changed it on Excel, we refreshed it, we removed it, and we brought it back in. It was fine. All right, so the same thing applies in the last project, where with Tableau, we can go in and change the types if we want. So most of it is numbers for this data set, except a few strings here. But everything else is looking fine, so I think we can go ahead and start building our charts. So click Sheet 1 when you're ready. All right, I am going to end this lecture here. In our next lecture, we'll start building some charts. I'll see you then. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome back. So in the last lecture, we connected to our data source, and in this lecture, we are ready to build some charts. So let's get into it. Now, one of the first charts I want to see is how many loans have high interest rates and how many loans have low interest rates, which I think would be quite interesting. So if you remember correctly, we did have an interest rate type field, which we calculated in Python. So where the higher loans are greater than 12% and then the lower loans are less than 12%. So I think we can use that. And I also want it as a pie chart, just because, you can either have a high loan or a high interest rate loan and a low interest rate loan. A pie chart would be good for that. So let's see how to do it. So one of the things we need to do is we need to get a count of loans. And to do that, we have the ID field, which represents, one row represents a unique loan. And if we count that, we should get the number of loans. So using that, we can create a calculated field. To create a calculated field, we can go to this arrow here and say create calculated field. We can then call it number of loans. And here it will be the count D, so the distinct count, open brackets, ID, and close brackets. Okay, so in Tableau, when you calculate or when you use functions like counts, you can actually check them out. So in the calculation pane, you'll notice there's this arrow on the right, and if you click on it, it has a library that has all the functions. So if we go to count, it tells us count expression returns a number of items in a group, and null values are not counted. And count D returns a number of distinct or unique items in the group. So we're telling Tableau, please give us a distinct count of the ID. Okay. And click OK. Okay. Now let us bring in interest rate and just bring it in. Select it, drag and drop it to columns. And let's bring in that loan count or number of loans. And you can either double click it or you can drag it and drop it into rows. I'm going to double click. All right. Now, how do we get it to a pie chart? All right, so to do that, we need to decide how we want it. So the pie chart, I actually wanted it colored by the interest rate type. So high and low can be 2 different colors. And the segment size should be determined by the number of loans, right? So the bigger the slice of pie, the more loans there are. So let's drag interest rate to color. And let's see what show me shows us. Okay, so show me doesn't show us a pie chart yet. It says that we need 1 or more dimension and 1 or more measures. Okay, so that's fine. What we can do is we can check the marks pane. So I want you to go to the marks pane, click on where it says text automatic, and let's see if we can change it to a pie. Okay, perfect. We can change it to a pie. So it's quite small now. Let's just make it a bit bigger. So do an entire view. Okay, so you can see something looks a bit off, right? So it's saying that firstly, the color legend has been generated. It's saying high is blue and low is orange. It's saying that high has 5,200 and low has 4,300 loans. But this pie looks like it's 50% of each, which is not true because there should be more loans with a high interest rate. We actually need to tell Tableau what angle we need. And the angle we need is by, or the angle here in this case is your pie slice size, and the angle we need needs to be by the number of loans. So look for number of loans again, select, drag, and drop it to angle. Okay, now it's looking much correct. So this looks like it's a bit more than 50%, and this is a bit less. Perfect. We can also change the labeling here and the colors. So let's do that. So let's go to color. Let's do an edit color. And I think we can change maybe this high. So let's do an automated color palette. So if you select in automatic, and let's choose this blue, and let's select this third blue. And for low, maybe we should do a gray. So select low, go to select color palette, and go to where it says gray, and let's choose that second gray, or maybe the third, and select OK. I actually like, maybe we should go a bit lighter with this. So let's do that. So go to color, edit colors, select low. Why don't we try this gray here? Yeah, so color palette will be automatic, and select low and select that gray and click OK. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, and let's work on the label. So I want the number and I want loans. So 4,357 loans. So let's do that. So select label. We are going to edit the actual text. So select the 3 dots. And where it says number of loans at the end, say space and just say loans. And select OK. Okay. I also want a percent. So I want to know how much percent is it for the low loans borrowers, and how much percent is it for the high loans borrowers. So I want a percent of the total, and you can actually do it quite easily in Tableau. So this is the label we're working with. Click on this arrow, and there's a set of quick table calculations here where you can choose if you want to see something like a percent of total, a difference, so the difference in percentage between high and low loans, the rank, which is first, which is second, moving average, the normal difference, the running total. We want percent of total. So if you click on it, it now changes to percent. But I also want the count. So what happens if we want the percentage and the count? Well, we just bring it in. So again, number of loans, click on it, drag and drop it to label. Perfect. We should actually move this loan text down here and have the percentage on top. So let's do that. Go to label, go to the 3 dots. All right, and instead of loans here, it's backspace. Let's put it on the second line like that. Sure, so make sure the percentage is on top and the number of loans on the bottom, and click OK. Great. Let's do some formatting. I think for the blue bank dashboard, I want a slightly gray background, and we need a heading. So how do we make it gray? So let's select any space in your pie chart and say format. While we're here, let's just change the font as well. So I like Tableau bold. So in your font here, make sure sheet is selected and go to the worksheet there. Click on the arrow and change to Tableau bold. Okay. Now go to this full bucket, which is the third icon. Make sure sheet is selected. Again, we want to apply this to the whole worksheet. So select on the worksheet color. And let's do the second gray. Yeah, so it's a very light gray. Perfect. Let's change this heading. So let's change it on the tab so it applies here. So let's call this, so I'm just double clicking on sheet 1 at the bottom, backspace, and let's call it loans by interest type. Okay, and let's edit this heading. So double click on the heading, select it, change to Tableau bold. Let's make it 12. So change to font size 12 and centralize and click OK. Right, that is your pie chart. Right, and the other one that I'd like to build, which is quite easy, would be, let's do number of loans by your FICO credit score categories. So remember that we had the column to categorize the FICO scores. Let's just count how many loans there are per category. So as always, we're going to do a shortcut. We formatted this chart really nicely. I don't want to redo this. So instead of creating a new sheet, I'm going to duplicate this. So click on this tab, right click and say duplicate. We can change the heading while we edit. So double click on the tab name. And let's say number of loans by credit score. All right. And here we can remove this angle aggregate number of loans and that. And let's change this marks to a bar. And we can remove in type. And let's bring in the FICO category and let's drag it to rows. And let's bring in number of loans and drag it to columns. All right. Okay, so it looks like most of the loans are excellent, or most of the loans have excellent FICO credit scores. Some have good, and quite a few have fair. So 489, which is a decent amount of loans, I say, that have okay credit scores. So we can sort this. So let's do that. Let's sort it. So this makes it sort highest to lowest. And let's just change this color to maybe a bit of a lighter blue. So select color and let's go one blue down. Okay. All right, yeah, I think the color scheme is fine. And I think we are sorted for this chart. So here we can see that most of the loans are excellent or good and some are fair. If you want to add a label here, you can. So if we bring in number of loans and drag and drop it to label. If you also want to maybe play around with the size a bit, if you click on the size, you can actually play around with the bar width. Right. You can also edit the tooltip. Right. So if we go to tooltip here, we can edit it. So let's just select everything and let's change the font to Tableau Bold. Let's give this tooltip a heading. So maybe something like this. And let's just say FICO categories. Maybe loan count by FICO categories. And we can select this heading and let's make it maybe this dark blue color. And select OK. Now if we hover over, it's a bit more formatted. Okay. I'm not going to do it for all the charts, but you get the idea on how to format a tooltip. Okay, so the additional chart I want to create is a histogram for the number of loans by the utilization rate. So I think it'll be more better once we start building that I explain. But let's create a new worksheet. So I want you to right click on number of loans by credit score and select duplicate. And to start off with, let's have a look at the revolving utilization field. So what this means here is that, per loan, what is the percentage amount that they've used. So for example, if I have a $100 loan and I've already used a $100 credit and I've already used $80, my utilization rate is 80%. And with this graph, I want to find out, how many people have utilized 90 to 100%, how many people have utilized 70 to 80%. And you can see that we're working in bins, right? So I want how many people have utilized 70 to 80%. That 70 to 80% is a bin. How many people have utilized 80 to 90%? That 80 to 90% is a bin. And when you work in bins, it's called histograms. So that's what we're going to be creating. We're going to be creating a histogram to determine the number of loans which fall into that utilization rate bin. So let's just clear our chart. And let's just bring in this revolving utilization and bring it to columns. I want to change this here. I actually want to change the field name. So click on revolving utilization and right click. And let's say rename. And let's call it utilization rate. Okay, once we bring it into columns, click on show me. And you can see a histogram is available. So let's click on that. All right, so now Tableau has already created a histogram with the bins, and let's see what they mean. So between 0 to, I think it's bins of 3, so Tableau automatically assigns bins of 3. So we have 676 people who have only utilized 0 to 3% of their full credit. The next one, we have 302 people who have only utilized between 3 to 6% of their full credit. So I want to change this. I actually want bins of 10 because I think that's more better. So how do we do that? When we created a histogram, Tableau immediately created this field called utilization rate bin. And this is where we can change the bin size. So if you click on this field and you right click and say edit, we can change the bin size. So it creates a new field and now it's asking us for the size of the bin. So let's change that to 10 and select OK. Okay, so now we have bin sizes of 10. So now we can hover over and we can say, okay, so between 0 to 10% utilization rate, we only have 1,318 loans. And we can see that most of it, I'd say a lot of these loans don't have a high utilization rate. We just have, so how many? 748 loans in the 90 to 100% utilization rate. Okay. So I think we can format this graph, but before we do, you can see the y-axis for this is count of utilization rates. So because each row of a data set represents one unique loan or loan ID, Tableau can actually just count the utilization rates. Okay, it makes sense. Okay, because one person's utilization rate represents one loan, so that's fine. But if you want to be more specific, we can replace this with number of loans. So click on number of loans and drag it, and now it's showing the number of loans. You can see that the graph didn't change because the count of everyone's utilization rates should be the same as the count of loans, because you can only have one utilization rate per loan, right? You can only use your loan once. Okay, let's work on this title. So let's double click on the tab and call it number of loans by utilization rate. And let's edit this color. So select color and let's change it to that same blue. Let's bring in number of loans as a label as well. So select number of loans and drag and drop it as a label. Okay, so I think I am going to end the lecture here. In our next lecture, I introduce you to if statements in calculated fields in Tableau. And then we start also building some headline cards as well. So I'll see you then. Bye.
It's break time. Do you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to get new videos. Share this video to open new premium videos and ebooks. We'll be a star freelancer.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, so in this lecture I spoke about us working with if statements in Tableau, and we are going to do it by creating a specific type of chart. So I'm just going to show you what chart we will be creating. Okay, so this is a chart we are going to be creating. So what I want is, I actually want the number of loans by income group. So if you remember correctly, we do have the annual income per borrower, and I want that grouped. So, if there are 10 borrowers earning between 10 to 50K, they're in this 10 to 50K group. Okay, and everyone earning between 50 to 100K, they'll be in this 50 to 100,000 group, and so on. So that's what we're going to create using if statements. So I'm going to start off by creating the calculation to group people based on the annual income, and then we can work from there. All right, so for starters, let's create a new sheet, and let's bring in ID to rows. It will ask if you want to add every single ID, and say yes, add all members. And let's bring in annual income. So you can click on it and double click. Okay. So this is per loan ID, we have the annual income. And now let's create a calculation to sort these out into groups. So then we're going to create a calculated field. And let's call the calculation annual income group. And the function we are going to be working on is the if statement. So let's go to the function search here. If you have it contracted, I just want you to expand it and say if, and move to the if function. So this if function tests a series of expressions, returning the then value for the first expression. And Tableau has an example. So it's saying if your profit is greater than 0, then it must return the word profitable. Else if the profit is equal to 0, then it must return the word break even, else loss. Okay, so this else if is a different condition. This if is a different condition. And if the conditions aren't met, then the last option is using else, which is a loss. So in better ways to explain it, we have something like this. So we're going to say if, and I'm just going to say condition 1. So if condition 1 is met, then output 1. Okay. Else, if condition 2 is met, then output 2. Else, okay, output 3. Output 3. Okay, so what I'm saying here is that if we have a specific condition, like if this person's income is between 50 to 100,000, then put them in the 50 to 100,000 group. If this person's income is between 0 to 50,000, then put them in the 0 to 50,000 group. Else, put them in a totally different group, maybe more than 1 million. So that's what we're getting at. So now that we know the formula or the format of this, let's try and input some actual field. So we're going to input the actual field. So I'm just going to backspace that condition 1. And I'm going to say if the annual income is less than 10,000, then, okay, what should our group say? So the group field can say less than 10K. All right. So if someone's annual income is less than 10,000, then they'll get assigned to the group less than 10K. Else if someone's annual income is greater and maybe equal to 10,000, and again the annual income is less than 50,000, then what output should it be? Okay, so here we used a joint condition. We said, again, so if the person's annual income is less than 10,000, then assign them to the 10K group. However, if they are between 10,000, so if the annual income is greater than 10,000, but it's less than 50,000, that's where the AND function comes in, then what should the group be called? So let's just say can be called 10K to 50K. Okay. We're going to do more, so we're going to say else if the annual income. So when I type it, I just click as soon as it shows up, but you can type the full thing. Is greater than or equal to 50,000 and the annual income is less than 100,000, then what are we going to say? Between 50K to 100K. Right, so I want you to pause the video and in a new line here, so don't worry about this now, in a new line, do the group for between 100 and 250,000. Okay, so you would have got something like this. So else if the annual income is greater than 100,000 but less than 250, then it would be 100K to 250K. Right, and then let's do maybe one more. So else if the annual income is greater and equal to 250, 1, 2, 3, and annual income is less than, let's do 500, then 250K to 500K. Okay. And maybe we should do one for greater than, so else if for greater than 500, so else if your annual income is just greater and equal to 500,000, then we can say greater than 500K, like that. Else, so if none of these conditions are met, then let's just say else unknown. Okay. Whenever we start an if statement, we also need to end it. So make sure there's an if and an end. The cases for this doesn't really matter, so you can see I swapped between uppercase and lowercase. So, but Tableau still reads it the same. Okay, and that's an if statement. So we're going to press OK when you're ready. Now let's bring in annual income to rows just next to ID. Okay, and now let's go through and check it. So this person has 85,000, so their group, I'm just gonna make this a bit bigger, is 50 to 100K. That's right. So let's scroll to this person here is 148,000 and their group is between 100 to 250K. Okay, so that makes sense. So we've done some checks, it's looking right. Let's create a graph. Okay, so let's delete the sheet 4. So I want you to right click on sheet 4 and click delete. And when we hear number of loans by utilization, let's right click the sheet and say duplicate. And let's remove the fields. Okay, so let's add our new annual income group field that we just created. And let's bring it to rows. And let's select number of loans and let's double click it. Perfect. Let's change this to a chart. So click on Show Me and change it to that bar chart. Click again to remove Show Me. Let's expand this to entire view. And let's change the color. So select color and change it to that blue that we like. And let's put a label for number of loans. So find number of loans and select label and drop it. Okay, perfect. This is looking great. And now we can see that people between 10,000 to 50,000 have the most loans, and people between 50 to 100,000 have the most. Okay. Makes sense that the high earners don't take out that many loans because probably they don't need it, and the ones that are too low probably don't qualify for loans. Let's sort this out because we should just sort it in the annual income group, so from smallest income to largest instead of this way. So in annual income group, we want to sort this, so select the arrow and say sort. Let's do a manual sort, so go to data source order and select manual. Now let's just rearrange this from lowest to highest. So start off with 10K, and if you select this button, it moves it right to the top. Okay, then it is 10 to 50, then it's 50 to 100, 100 to 250, 250 to 500, and 500. So everything's looking fine. And close it. Perfect. Okay, so now I want to create some headline cards because I think it would be nice if Bluebank has something like the average debt to income ratio across all their loans, right? So what is the average ratio that their borrowers have, and maybe the average days with the credit line, maybe something like a max revolving budget so they can see, a max revolving balance so they can see who has the most credit balance, and a min and max interest rate. I think those are nice cards to have at the top of your dashboard. So they just represent headline figures. So let's create that. Okay, and please remember to duplicate your sheet. So just right click on that number of loans by utilization and duplicate it. Okay, so now that we created our new sheet, let's remove the pulls. Right, and let's call this, so I'm just double clicking on the sheet name, average DTI ratio. Okay, so let's bring in that average DTI ratio. So select it, drag it, and drop it to text. Okay, so you can see there's a sum DTI, but remember we want the average. So let's change this from a sum to an average. So select the arrow. Instead of measure sum, we're going to change it to an average. Okay, so the sum will sum up everyone's DTI and give us that 120,000 value. The average will take an average of that. Right, let's centralize this and make this text bigger. So go to your text pane and alignment and horizontal, centralize. Okay, so horizontal and click center. And then let's do these three dots. So let's say enter. And let's say average debt to income ratio. So something like this. So at income, I just press enter to get into the new line. And let's just highlight average DTI. And let's change that figure to 15. Okay, and select OK. All right, I think that looks fine. Okay, let's create another card and let's do the average days with a credit line. So let's duplicate the sheet. So right click on it and say duplicate. Let's double click on the new sheet, backspace, and say average days with credit line. Okay, and instead of average DTI, we're going to say the average days with credit line. So click on it, drag it, and just until it's right on top of text, drop it. Again, it's sum, so let's change it to average. So click on the small arrow, go to measure sum, and go to average. Okay. We need to change this because it's not DTI anymore. It's your average days with credit line. So let's go to text. We want to just change the text, so go to the 3 dots. And instead of average debt to income ratio, it's average days with enter credit line. And click OK. Let's also do maybe a max revolving balance. So there is revolving balance here. So I want to find the maximum revolving balance. So, how much is that maximum revolving balance? So let's again duplicate this sheet. So right click on it and say duplicate. Double click on the new sheet, backspace, and let's just say max revolving balance. Okay, and what do you think we're going to do here? So we're going to find the revolving balance, we're going to replace it, and instead of average, we're going to put max. So here's a revolving balance field. Click, drag it, and drop it on top. And as you can see, there's sum, but we want the max. So click on the arrow, go to measure sum, and go to max. Perfect. Now I do want this as a $sign. It's a currency, all right, because it's a maximum balance somebody has. So let's change that. So let's right click on the label. Let's go to format. Let's go to numbers, currency standard. So that chooses our currency. So I want United States. So it's English, it'll be United States. Let's remove the decimal places. So go to currency custom and remove those decimal places. Okay. And then I also want to know what's the min interest rate. So how much is the minimum interest rate from all the borrowers, and how much is the maximum interest rate that the borrowers have. So let's start off with minimum. So let's create a new sheet. So right click there and say duplicate. Double click on the heading of the sheet or the sheet name, backspace. Let's call it min interest rate. Okay, and let's just close out of this pane. Let's find the interest rate here, and we're going to drop it over text. So drag and drop it over the text. We're going to change the sum to the min. We also want to make it a percentage. Okay, so let's click on the arrow, click on format. Instead of numbers, click on it and choose percentage. Okay. Don't think we changed, did we change the text in the last sheet? I don't think we did. So we need to do that. Okay, but I'm still back at minimum interest rate. Let's go to the text. Click on the 3 dots and let's do minimum interest enter rate and click OK. Let's go back to max revolving balance and let's change this text. So go to text, go to the 3 dots, and make sure it says max revolving interbalance. So like that. And select OK. Okay, and the last one is the max interest rate. So let's duplicate this sheet tab. Instead of min interest rate sheet name, double click, backspace, and say max interest rate. Okay, and instead of min, we're going to change it to max. So click on the arrow, click on measure, and change it to max. Okay, and the text we need to change to max. So click on text, click on the 3 dots, and change it to max, and click OK. All right. Now we have all our cards. Just make sure all the cards have the actual correct corresponding text. And we have all our charts. The final thing I want to build before we move on to the dashboard is I just want a spreadsheet of the data. So I just want plain data as a worksheet because we are going to do something with it. So let's do that quickly. So I want you to create a new sheet and call the sheet click for more info. All right. And let's bring in some important information. So let's bring in ID and say add all numbers. So I'm just adding it as a row. Let's bring in FICO category. Let's bring in annual income group and purpose. Okay. And now let's bring in some figures. So let's bring in annual income, days with credit line, DTI, interest rate, revolving balance, and utilization rate. So I'm just double clicking on all of them and you can see they've been added. Let's just increase that header space. Okay, so something like that. And if you want to format it, you can. So I guess we should. So let's do that. So I want you to right click any cell in the table and click format. Go to the full bucket here. And worksheet just change to maybe a gray. Okay. Where it says row banding, change to none. So for both pane and header, change to none. And then go back to the font. Go to worksheet and let's change Tableau book to Tableau bold. Just to make it look a bit better. Okay, close that. You can deselect that and now it looks a bit more better. Okay, and I'll show you what we're going to do with this spreadsheet, but basically if someone wants to know more information on the dashboard, they can click the dashboard and it will take them to the spreadsheet. So that's what I'm getting at. All right, awesome. I am going to end here, and in the next lecture we will build a dashboard. So I'll see you then. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, so we created all our charts and now we need to build our dashboard. Before we do, I think we forgot to rename one of the sheets here. So remember we duplicated the sheet to create our annual income group. And we forgot to rename it. So let's just do that. So it should be number of loans by utilization rate. And let's call it number of loans by income group. Okay. Great. Right, and now we are ready to create our dashboard. So let's go to the dashboard icon, which is this window icon right here. So you're going to just click on it. Okay, and once you've clicked on it, let's just fix the sizing of the dashboard, because this is our dashboard window. So for the size, let's change that. So instead of range, let's go to fixed size, and let's do 1200 pixels with the width and 650 as the height. Okay, I want to change the color of the dashboard as well, so let's do that. So I'm going to click dashboard at the top and click format, and then for default shading or dashboard shading, select the default color pane and change it to that gray. Okay, let's close that. And now let's start bringing in some charts. So let's start with our pie chart. Let's bring it in. So drag it and drop it. Okay, and don't worry too much about the legend, we can fix it later. And then let's do the histogram, so which is number of loans by utilization. So click, drag and drop it until it looks like that. Right. Let's do number of loans by credit score. So click, drag and drop it. All right, and then the number of loans by income group. So just drag it and drop it until it's like this. Okay, and for this here, I think, yeah, maybe we can keep it here, just resize it a bit. All right. Now the other thing I want to add is obviously all our cards right in the bottom. Now the other thing I want to add is the cards. So we can add the cards on the top. So let's do that with a container. So select horizontal, and as soon as it looks like that, you can drop it. All right, and then we can resize everything, maybe something like that. Okay. So let's bring in the logo first. So select image, drag and place it in the container, and choose the image. So we're going to that same data file and choosing the blue bank logo, and select open and click OK. We need to actually fit and center the image, so click on the image again and say edit image. So make sure you click on the image, the arrow, and say edit image, and go to fit and center and click OK. Right, let's bring in text because I want a dashboard heading. So select that, drag it and drop it to the right, so when it looks like that. And the text, so let's make the text Tableau bold and the heading size 15, and let's call it Blue Bank Loan Dashboard. Okay, let's change the color to maybe a bit more of a black and click OK. Now let's bring in all our cards. So let's start with average DTI ratio and click, drag and drop it as soon as it's to the right. Okay. Just trying to resize everything now. Okay, and let's bring in the average days with credit line. So click, drag, and as soon as it's on the right, you can drop it. Let's bring in the max revolving balance. So click, drag, and as soon as it's on the right like that, drop it. And max interest rate. So click, drag, and as soon as it looks like that, drop it. And the max one, so click, drag. So the min one, sorry, there was a min one before, and now we bring in the max one, we're dropping it to the right. we're going to hide all these titles. So just on the actual title, right click and say hide title. Okay, so right click here and hide title, right click and hide title, right click and hide title, right click and hide title. Let's bring in some filters. So I do want to filter by the interest rate, the number of loans or the credit score, the income group as well. So let's do that. So for interest rate, so let's select that pie graph, click on more options, go to filters and bring in interest rate type. Okay, you can see it brings it in here, but I think we should move it and let's create a section of filters here. So on the left of the dashboard, removed it, and as soon as it's shaded like that, drop it. Okay. Right, and then select that filter and apply to all the dashboards or all the sheets in the dashboards. So say apply to worksheets, and you can say all using this data source. Okay, and let's try it out. So instead of all, let's select high. Perfect. Let's select all again. Right, and then let's do the credit score filter. So click number of loans by credit score, click on the arrow, click on the filters, and let's bring in FICO category. Again, you can see it will pop up anywhere on your dashboard, but wherever it pops up, select the notch, drag it and drop it there. Okay, make sure we also apply this filter to the whole dashboard. So select the filter, click on the arrow, click on apply to worksheets, selected worksheets, and say select all on dashboard and click OK. Okay, you can also do apply worksheets and all using this data source. Let's do number of loans by income group. So select the sheet, select the arrow, go to filters, and let's do income group. Click on the annual income group, hold the notch and bring it down. All right, and let's make sure this is also applied to all the sheets. So select the arrow, apply to worksheets, and all using this data source. Okay, let's make a little filters heading. So select text and let's apply it to the top, so just above interest rate type, and let's just call it filters. Select everything, change it to Tableau bold, change it to 15, centralize it, and let's make it maybe blue, so that blue color, so it looks like that, and click OK. All right, great. Now let's just make sure we can filter. So if I want to click on this part of the slice of pie, which is the high interest rate, everything should filter. Okay, so to do that, click on the filter icon in the chart and let's try it out. Great, so now the whole thing filters. So let's do the same for this chart here as well, and let's try it out. And let's do the same for the income group chart. So click on it and apply that filter and just see if it filters. Great. Now the other thing I want to do is, I'm picturing a banker maybe looking at this dashboard and they see something interesting, like for instance 489 loans have a fair credit score, but who exactly are these loans and what's happening? So if you remember, we did create a spreadsheet, okay, called click for more info, and what I want is I want the user to be able to maybe click a bar and be able to go to that spreadsheet where they can just view that row level data. So how do you do that? Well, that's called using dashboard actions. And if we go to dashboard and if we go to actions, we can do something like that. So what we can tell Tableau is that when a user clicks the dashboard, there can be a menu where they can click for more details. All right. Filters are also actions. Okay, so you can see there's 3 generated filters, which we created when we selected that filter icon for the 3 shots. Filters are also actions, and you can see 3 filters have been created when we selected that filter icon for the 3 charts. Okay, so let's add an action. We still want a filter, so you can add actions where someone clicks on something and they go to a URL or specific sheet, but I want it filterable because I want the user to just select, the specific bar that they're checking. And let's call the filter click for more info. Okay, and I do want a menu to pop up. All right, so menu means that they click something and the menu says click for more info, which they can decide to go. If you say select, all right, and you click select, they just go immediately to the click for more info spreadsheet. And if they hover, they don't need to do anything. They just hover over the bar, they'll go to the click for more info. Okay, and it's saying, all right, so what can the user click and what happens? So when the user clicks any of the charts in the dashboard, there's a menu that pops up asking them, hey, do you want more information? And where do they end up? So instead of dashboard 1, they'll end up in the click for more info spreadsheet. And clearing the selection will show all values. So that means if they ever clear the filter, the whole dashboard gets filtered or unfiltered. Okay, and I just want you to click OK. You can see our filter shows up and click OK. So what exactly does that mean? All right, so let's see. We're the banker and we want to know, hey, these 489 loans, what are they? So I click on the bar and you can see click for more info pops up. So that was a menu item. And if I click that, it now takes me to the 489 loans that have been classed as fair and just gives me that row level detail, which is pretty cool. If I go back to the dashboard and I deselect it, and we go back to the worksheet, the click for more spreadsheet is now filtered back to its original form. Let's go back to the dashboard and go to dashboard, go to actions, select click for more info and go to edit. Okay, and here I'm just going to again describe the other options. So it says run action on, and we selected menu. We can run the action on select, so let's try that and click OK. Click OK again, and if we just select anything, and go to click for more info, you can see that now the dashboard filters. Actually, let me just remove that. Okay, so if we choose select, then the user just selects a bar and then click for more info will filter, and then hover is the user just hovers over the bar. So most times menu is used because it does give that user that nice pop-up where it says, do you want to click for more info? And you do that and it goes to that spreadsheet. Okay. Right, and we are nearly done. Our last step is let's upload our Python script so we can add it to the title. So I'm going to go to my web browser. Okay, so I'm at GitHub. And what I'm going to do is I am going to create or go to my Python and Tableau repository. And I'm going to load my file. So we're going to add another file. Going to upload files. and let's choose our blue bank file. So I'm going to choose a bluebank.py file to upload. Click on open. We can call it bluebank.py, and you can even add a description if you want. So this is my script for blue bank loan analysis. Okay, and then we can do the same here. So I'm just going to copy this. This was done on Python. When you're done, you can say commit changes. Okay. All right, so now you can see blue bank shows up, and we're going to select it and then just copy the link. Let's go back to Tableau Public. Let's double click that. Say enter, and it's actually say my Python script colon, and it's paste. And then let's change or select everything other than the blue bank loan dashboard and change it to maybe 10 and click OK. All right. Let's centralize this heading because it does look a bit weird. So select everything and centralize and click OK. All right, that looks better. Okay, once you're ready, I think we can go ahead and publish. So let's rename this dashboard. So double click on dashboard 1 and call it Blue Bank Loan. Okay, and what you can do here for a dashboard is that now that we added all the charts to the dashboard, we can actually hide these worksheets. So if you right click and say hide all sheet, so if you right click and say hide all sheets, it then hides all the sheets that are present in the dashboard, and you can see click for more info is still there. And now let's publish. So let's go to and now let's publish. So let's go to save. And when you click on it, it asks you to sign into Tableau Public. We'll ask you for a workbook title, so let's just call it Blue Bank. And click Save. Okay, and this is it. This is our dashboard. You can edit it online and it will still have that same functionality as well. Okay, so if we click on good, it will filter on good, and then if we click on more info, it will take us to the more info section. To go back to our dashboard, we just click back. Okay, and this is your dashboard. Okay, and this is your dashboard. Right, it should have the same functionality. So if we click on good, it will show up. And then the other thing I just want you to do is, if you go to settings, I want you to select show sheets as tabs. Okay, because if you remember correctly, we do have that click for more info that needs to show up. Okay, so you can see click for more info is here and blue bank is here. So if we do want to click for more info, so I'm selecting excellent. And if I go to click for more info, it shows up. And then I can go back to my dashboard. So just make sure you enable that. Right, everything is looking good here. I think we're done. And we can start the final project in the next lecture. So I'll see you then. Bye. Hi everyone. So this is what we are going to be building. We're going to be building a BlogMe article and sentiment analysis. As always, it can link to our actual Python script we used. We have the number of engagements by published date. So this is where we used one worksheet to create 3 charts. And we also learned about average lines. We're also doing the top negative sentiment titles and top positive. So in these ones, we learned how to use sets and how to do context filtering. And then finally, we have top engagement articles mentioning murder using that murder keyword flag that we created in Python, and sources by total engagement. We're also going to learn how to join a different set of data to our primary data set. Lots to do here and super fun. It's also the last dashboard we'll be building. So I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome back. So this is our final project and we are ready to build some data visualizations. So I'm going to read the project for BlogMe again just to refresh our memory. Project is in the project brief.pdf file or in the lecture slides. So BlogMe, a famous blogging business, has a data set of news articles that they need further analysis on. Firstly, they'd like keywords to be extracted from the headlines of the article. And secondly, they would need to determine the sentiment of the news article. Okay. So we have done the sentiment analysis using Python, and if you remember, we did do the keyword flag, and our keyword flag was murder, where we would flag articles that mentioned the word murder. So we're ready for analysis, and make sure you have the relevant files. So the data file we would need is obviously the cleaned version of BlogMe. We also need the file BlogMe sources, and that would be in the project brief. So the link to that will be in the project brief. It will also be in the lecture description as well. Okay. Okay, so I have opened Tableau Public and let's connect our data. So if you remember, our data that we exported after cleaning on Python is a XLSX file, which is an Excel file. So that's the data we're going to be connecting with. So you can select Microsoft Excel. And we want BlogMe clean. Open. Okay, so this is a window that you'll be quite familiar with. It is the data source window. And we can see that the BlogMe Microsoft Excel file has been opened. You'll notice that BlogMe data is being shown. And that's because, if you remember, we actually changed that sheet name to BlogMe data. We can also have a look at the data if, we just want to investigate. So if you click on this table icon, we can see the actual raw data. Okay, Now, there is an additional data source that I did say that we need to download, which is called BlogMe Sources. And I'm going to open it and we can have a look at it. Okay, so this is the BlogMe Sources dataset. And I think it just has some additional information related to the sources. Okay, so for each source, it has the date founded, the headquarters, and the key people. Now what I want to do is actually want to join this data to my BlogMe clean data. And how do I do that on Tableau? Well, let's get to that. So I'm just going to close this file. So Tableau has this really nice feature called Tableau joins, which are quite similar to SQL joins, where you can join data if they have something in common. So if we look at the BlogMe data, we know that source name is the same as the BlogMe sources. Okay, so if I open up the BlogMe sources, so this is the BlogMe sources, we have source name here, and we have source name here. And if you scroll, you can see that source name and source name is the same, and that's how they are linked. So we have a key or we have an ID. Now, Tableau has quite a nice and easy way to join data, which I am going to show you. So there is some theory related to Tableau joins, and I want you to open up the file tableujoins.pdf. It will be in your class notes or your lecture description below. It's also in the project brief. The link is at the end of the project brief. Okay, so I will read it and we'll go through everything about Tableau joins. So joins are quite important in data analysis in general. So let's say there are two tables. One table is an order table, which shows us the orders a customer has made. And the other table is a product table, which gives you details of their product. And we want to join these two. So we have the order table as table A, and we have the product data as table B. Now Tableau gives us quite a few ways to join this, and I'm going to go through each one. So firstly, before we start, we can notice that there is a link between the two tables, and it is product ID. So product ID is present here and product ID is present here. The first join we'll look at is an inner join, and Tableau has this inner join function. It produces only the same set of records that match in both table A and table B. So if we go back to the original table, we can see product ID as P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. But the product data table has P1, P2, P3, and 6. So not all the product IDs and the order data is actually present in the product data. Okay. So for an inner join, what you'll see is this as your final Tableau table. All right. Because P1, P2, and P3, they exist in both tables, only those rows will pull through. Okay, and that's why it's an inner join, which means that the IDs that exist in both tables will be pulled through. Okay, anything else will be excluded. So what is a left join? Well, a left join only selects data from the left table and any matching rows in the right. Okay, so we know that in table A, P4 and P5 existed in the orders table. It didn't exist in the product table. So the final table has nulls when we join it. P6 existed in the product table. It did not exist in the order table. So the left join will bring in all the rows of the order table and the matching rows from the product table. But since P6 isn't in the orders table, it's not going to bring it in because the left table is your primary table. The right join is actually the reverse of the left. Okay, so similar, the right join selects data from the right table and matching rows from the left. Okay, so we know P6 existed in the product table, but not in the orders table. So the final table you'll see in Tableau will have nulls for any order data for P6. Also, P4 and P5 existed in the orders table, didn't exist in the product table. And that's why when the right join, we won't see P4 and P5 because the product table doesn't have those keys. And then a full outer join has a final set that contains all rows from both left and right tables with matching rows from both sides where available. In a case that there's no match, the missing side will have null values. So with a full outer table, it will bring in all the data in the order table, all your data in your product table, and where there was data in your order table and not in your product, it just populated with null. And again, where there was data in your product table but not in your order, it populated for null. Now keep in mind, sometimes your full outer join is grayed out depending on your data sources. So for example, for MySQL databases, it's also grayed out. And that's, in a nutshell, Tableau joins. So I'm going to go back to our Tableau public. And I am going to bring in our data sources or blog.me sources file. So to add a new connection, select Add. Click on Microsoft Excel. And bring in that blog.me sources file. And select Open. Okay, now you can see blog.me sources is in. And how do we bring it here? All right, so to bring the data in here, we are going to click into this main logical table. And now we can add it in. So when we click on blog.me sources, we can see there's a sheet 1. And let's view that. Okay, so this is your source data. And here's our source name column. Now I think what's best for this particular exercise is a left join, right? Because the blog.me data table has lots of rows. It has multiple sources. And for left join, it's obviously nice to have many to one. So where many is our blog.me data and one is our source table data. So there's no duplication. So I'm going to do a left join. So to do that, we click on sheet 1, we drag it, and we'll drop it in the window. And now you see something which is what we saw in the Tableau joins file. Tableau is going to ask you, how do you want this data joined? So we're going to do a left join, where the blog.me data is a left table, and the source data is a right table. What are we going to join it with? Well, we're going to join it with that common key, which is source name. And for sheet 1, it's source name. Now, since the source names are exactly the same, Tableau doesn't like duplicating fields. So it will just call your second table that you bring in. Then if the fields are the same, it just adds a number to it. Okay, and that's that. While we're here, why don't we just change this? So let's change the name, double click on it, go backspace, and click or change to sources. Now, let's see if it shows up. So on this pane, let's just scroll. So this is all our original data. Everything is looking good. And here we go. Here are our source data. Perfect. So now we have additional source information because we joined our source data to our blog.me data on the source name. So technically source name 1. And if we scroll and source name is the same. Because it's the same, I think we should maybe hide source name 1. No, because it's really unnecessary to bring duplicate fields. So let's select that. Let's click the arrow and let's click hide. Okay, perfect. like I said, everything else is looking good. So why don't we move on to building some worksheets? So when you're ready, let's click sheet 1. And with that being said, I'll end this lecture, and in our next lecture, we'll start building some charts. I'll see you then. Bye. Hi everyone, welcome back. So in this lecture, we are going to build some charts. And the first chart we're going to build is maybe a line chart. And I just want to see something simple. So I want to see per maybe published month, how many engagement, comment counts, reaction counts, and share counts we get, or BlogMe gets. So let's look at where we can find, so there is a published at, and let's bring it in. So click on published at, and let's bring it into rows. Click on add all members. All right. So you can see here that we have a date and we have the time. But the time is in a weird format, and to be honest, I don't think we need the time. I just want to extract the date, and once I extract just the date, Tableau can actually, we can tell Tableau to change the format of the field to a date. Okay, because now we can't do much with this. Tableau doesn't know that this is a date. So how do we do that? To do that, we can create a calculated field. And there is a function in Tableau where you can extract a certain amount of characters based on a position. Like you can extract the first 4 characters from the left, etc. So I think that's what we're going to use. So let's create a calculated field. And let's call it published date. And the function I'm referring to is called left. So in the search bar, if this is contracted, click this arrow to expand it. Let's type in left. And what Tableau is saying here is that left returns the specified number of characters from the start of a given string. So for example, left calculation 4, which means just extract 4 characters from the word calculation, starting at the left, and it's giving us an answer of calc. So that's what we want. So we are going to extract, so I'm just going to count here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 characters from the left. So let's do that. Let's say left, open brackets, and the field is published at. Okay, I'm going to click it when it shows up, comma, 10, close brackets, and select OK. Right, and let's drag it and drop it next to it. Okay, perfect. So this is looking like a date. All right, and let's change this to a date format. Okay, so instead of ABC, let's click on this arrow. Let's go to change data type, and let's change it to a date. Okay. Let's pull both pulls out, and let's bring in publish date, and let's add it to columns. Okay, now this looks a bit more familiar. Let's remove this null. So to remove it, you just select null and exclude it. And let's bring this to, I want to see day. So not the first day, the second day. So where we get the full month, day, year. All right. And now let's bring in engagement. Let's do engagement comment count and just double click it. Okay, great. What if I want to add reaction count? Will I be able to do that? So let's click, and I want you to drag, and let's drop it with some engagement comment count to the right of that. Okay, great. You can see now we have two graphs. We have one for comment, one for reaction, and let's add one more. Let's add share. So click, drag, and drop it to the right. All right. And that's how we're able to get 3 graphs in one sheet. Let's do some formatting. So let's call this sheet. So double click on the sheet, backspace, and let's call it number of engagement by publish date. So number of engagements by publish date. And let's just format this title. So double click on it, highlight everything. Let's do Tableau bold. Let's do 12 and let's centralize it and click OK. Right, and then I think the color for blog me is green. So let's just make everything green. And what you can see is in the marks pane, as you added a pull in, the marks cards actually added a tab as well. So this tab is just for the engagement comment count, where you can change the color and the size just for the comment count, so just for this upper graph. This tab is just for the engagement reaction count. So this is where you can change the color, the size, the labels just for this count. And then lastly, the engagement share count. Okay, so you can actually format each of these individually, but I think we can format it all. So if I want to format it all, click on all, and here we can change the color once and it applies through. So let's click on color and let's get a green. So maybe that green, and click OK, or click out. Let's bring in let's make the size a bit bigger. Okay, so I think that's fine. And let's add some labels as well, because I think that would be quite nice too. All right, so let's do it individually. So for some engagement comment count, okay, let's add that as a label. So make sure you select the correct field, drag it and drop it as a label. For some engagement reaction count, add that as a label. So click, drag and drop it as a label. And then for some engagement share count, add that as a label. So click, drag and drop as a label. Let's format this. Let's round it into thousands and take it from there. So we can start with the engagement share count. Right click on some engagement share count, the label, go to format, select numbers, go to number custom. Okay, because it's not a currency, it's just summing up the number of reactions and number of comments, etc. So number custom, and let's change the display units to thousands. Okay, that looks a bit better. And let's remove the decimal places because we don't need it. Okay, let's do the same here. So if we click on some engagement reaction count, click here. And if you click here and you still open this, so if this is still open and you click here, then you should be able to change it. So go to numbers, number custom, remove the decimal places, and then add the thousands. Okay. And then some engagement comment count, again, click here, number custom, remove decimal places, display units, add the thousands. Great. Let's change the font format and remove the grid lines. So I want you to right click anywhere on the chart and go to format, go to grid lines, And I think these are row grid lines. So go to, instead of sheet, go to row. Select grid lines and say none. And let's change the font. So go to a font icon. Make sure sheet is selected. For worksheet, click on it. Change to Tableau Bold. You can change it to any font you want. I think Tableau Bold is reasonably standard. And we can keep it at 9 and keep the color. Right, and we can also change the axis. So maybe instead of day of publish date, let's just change it to publish date. So if you right click the axis and say edit axis, here you can choose things like if you want an automatic axis or a uniform axis. Maybe you want a fixed axis on a specific date. All right, you can show times or you don't need to. You can reverse a scale or have a log scale. And here's where you change the title. So let's just say published date. Okay. And then you can close it. Okay, so the next graph I wanted to create is I wanted to see by total engagement how which articles are most popular in the negative sentiment and which articles are most popular in the positive sentiment. Okay, all right, so the first thing we need to do is maybe let's create a new sheet and let's have a look. So just create a normal sheet and let's bring in title. So just click on title and bring it to rows and click on add all members. And let's bring in negative sentiment. So just double click neutral sentiment and then positive sentiment. So what I was thinking is that if a title has maybe greater than 0.5 of the positive sentiment, then it's positive. And if a title has greater than 0.5 of the negative sentiment, then it's negative. Okay, so for example, this here has a 0.565 negative sentiment. So I'd say this title would be negative. Whereas maybe can't really find too many positive articles. This here has a sentiment of 0.521. So I'd say this title would be a positive article. So I think we can create a calculated field to have some sort of sentiment flag where if the title neg sentiment is greater than 0.5, it's negative. And if the title pos sentiment is greater than 0.5, it's positive. So let's do that. So let's create a calculated field. So go to the arrow icon on the top right of this pane. Click create calculated field. And let's just call it sentiment. And now I think we are going to use the if statement. Okay. So for instance, if, okay, and remember we have something like condition 1 is met, then output 1. So output 1. Else if condition 2 is met, then output 2. Else output 3 if no conditions are met, and then you have to always put an end. Okay, so what is condition 1? Well, condition 1 is that if the title neg sentiment column is greater than 0.5, then the sentiment is negative. So let's do that. So highlight condition 1, backspace, and say if your title, so here it is showing up. I'm just going to click that. So if that is greater or equal to 0.5, then, so let's say negative. else if, and for condition 2, let's say title pos sentiment is greater than equal to 0.5, then positive. Okay. Else, we can say unknown. Okay. So, the sentiment field is populated. If your title neg sentiment is greater than 0.5, then that sentiment is negative. If your title pos sentiment is greater than 0.5, then the sentiment is positive. So let's click OK. And let's bring it in. So click on sentiment and bring it in and drop it next to title. Okay. So let's just see. So we have a positive here. And that's true. So 0.521 for positive means it's a positive one. Let's find another one. Here we go. So this one here, 0.509, so it is a positive. So it's looking right. And let's just check this here. That's a negative one, 0.507 negative. Okay, perfect. So this looks correct. So that being said, I am going to right-click sheet 2 and delete it. So let's create a chart. So let's duplicate the sheet. So right-click and say duplicate. And let's double-click on the sheet name, backspace, and let's call it top negative sentiment titles by total engagement. Okay. So let's remove these fields. We can still keep that year filter because that's just filtering out any null or blank dates. So let's remove everything else. And let's bring in title. So click on title and drag it to rows and say add all members. Okay. And I want to see the top negative sentiment titles by total engagement. So how do we calculate total engagement? Well, I think the total engagement would be the engagement comment count plus the reaction count plus the share count, right? So why don't we create a calculated field for that? So click on the arrow, click on create calculated field, and let's call it total engagement. Click on the pane here, and we can bring those fields in. So another good thing about creating these fields is you can also select the field here and bring it in and drop it. Okay, so total engagement comment count plus that by engagement reaction count plus that by engagement share count. So that would give us the total engagement. And select OK. And let's double click it. Okay. Okay. Now let's filter by negative sentiment because we just want the negative sentiment articles. So let's go to our sentiment flag that we created. Click on it and drop it to filter. And we just want to see negative sentiment and click OK. Okay, let's change this to a bar chart. So click on show me and click on the bar chart. Perfect. And let's sort this. So click on this icon and it will sort it from highest total engagement to lowest. Right, and let's just size this up. And I'm just making it maybe a bit more wider. All right. Okay. And now let's do some formatting. So let's choose a color. So since it's negative, let's do red. So let's select color and let's do red. All right. Maybe that's too bright. Maybe that second red there. Right. Now, what if I want to see just the top 10? How do I do that? So we can just individually filter and just show, the top 10 by articles. But the other thing we can do is using something called sets. Okay. And what a set is a set is a subset of the data that's filtered in a specific condition. So for example, we want to filter this subset of data to show the top 10 articles by total engagement. Okay, so let's do that. So to create a set, we go to what we're deciding the top 10 should be. So top 10 by title. So let's go to title. Click on the arrow. Click on create and click set. Okay. The name should be top 10 articles by engagement or by total engagement. Okay, and then click on top. And we're going to say by field and Tableau populated. So top 10 by total engagement and the sum. So top 10 by the sum of total engagement. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. If we select OK, you can see a new field is created. And this field just acts like a filter. Okay, so if we take it and we drop it in, it should filter on the top 10 articles by total engagement. Problem being is that it's currently, because we have a current filter on sentiment equals negative, they are the only top 10 articles by total engagement are probably positive or unknown sentiments. So if we remove this, okay, let's just check the sentiment. So select sentiment and bring it in and just drop it by title. Here we go. So you can see all of these are unknown. All right. So sets get filtered after your main filters, right? So if we bring in top 10 article, and now I just want to see negative sentiments, it's not going to show me anything. Okay, so this is what we need to do. We need to bring sentiment in first, and I'm telling Tableau that I just want to see negative, and select OK. Now I want to tell Tableau, filter this first. Okay, before anything else, filter this first. And there's a thing when you do this called add to context. So when you bring in a filter, if you say add to context, you can see Tableau changes it to gray. Let's do the same for year of publish date, because I want these filters to just happen first. Tableau is telling us this filter is getting applied first, and then whatever happens will go next. So if we bring in top 10 articles by total engagement, okay, Tableau first does the filter, so it first looks for negative title articles, and then it finds the top 10 of those by engagement. Okay. Right, everything else here looks fine. Let's just fit to entire view. So instead of standard, go to entire view. Right. And then similar to that, I also want maybe the top positive articles by total engagement. So let's right click this and duplicate. And maybe instead of negative, we're going to double click and let's call it top positive sentiment titles by total engagement. And now instead of negative, we are going to change this. So select the filter, say edit filter. Oh, we need to actually bring the set out. And now don't worry about this. This is because it's trying to fit every article in this one pane. But let's just change this. So edit filter. Let's do positive and select OK. And now let's bring in the set. Okay, because it's filtering on this first. And now it's calculating the top 10 articles based on the set. So bring it in. Okay, great. And you can see these are quite positive articles. Let's change the color to green. So go to color and change it to green. All right. And I am going to end here. In the next lesson, we'll do 2 more charts and then we'll build a dashboard. So I'll see you then. Bye.
It's break time. Do you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to get new videos. Share this video to open new premium videos and ebooks. We'll be a star freelancer.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, so we created 3 charts and I think we have 2 more to go. So let's get to it. So the other chart I do want to see is the articles by total engagement. And I want articles by total engagement, but they're mentioning murder. So let's duplicate the sheet. So right click on it and say duplicate. And let's double click on the title. And let's say total engagement of articles mentioning murder. Okay, so let's remove the set. Okay, let's change this entire view to fit width. And I think this is fine, so because we have total engagement and we have title, but I actually just want to see articles mentioning murder. So we did create that keyword flag, which is here. And before we do anything, keyword flag is actually not a measure, it's a dimension. So if you remember, keyword flag is binary. It's 1 if the article or the article title mentions murder, and it's 0 if it doesn't. Okay, we can't perform mathematical operations with binary fields, so technically it should be a dimension. So we can click on keyword flag and bring it up to dimensions. Okay, let's remove the sentiment positive and we can keep this year publish date. Let's take keyword flag and drop it into filters and just select 1. So now we should see the engagement for articles mentioning murder, which we can see. Let's bring in some labels because I do want maybe the labels at the end. So let's go to total engagement, drag it and drop it into label. Okay, great. Okay, and then the last graph I want is something quite simple. I just want the sources by total engagement. So let's right click on your total engagement of articles mentioning murder and duplicate. Let's rename the sheet. Let's double click on it and backspace and say sources by total engagement. And let's remove this keyword flag. And I think instead of title, we can have sources. So let's find source name, which is here. Drag and drop it right on top of title. Okay, perfect. Let's sort from highest to lowest. And let's put in the headquarters as well. So remember, this is our join data. So select headquarters and drop it next to source name. Okay, great. Let's remove the label because we don't need it. and let's go to fit entire view. Let's remove the grid lines here. So select anywhere on the sheet and right click and say format. Go to grid lines. Go to rows. So it doesn't look like there's any grid lines there. And maybe go to columns. There's a column grid line. Select that and say none. And then go to cells. So this next one here. And go to rows. And where it says row divider at the end, let's remove that. So where it says pane, select it and say none. Okay, perfect. All right. And I think that's it for all the graphs. It's looking pretty good. I think we should go ahead and maybe remove these grid lines as well. So let's, in the total engagement of articles mentioning murder, let's right click. Let's click format. Let's check grid lines, and it's not rows. Let's check columns and select it and say none. Go to total positive sentiment titles. Just click here and keep this window open. And you can see grid lines for columns. So select it and say none. And let's go to top negative sentiment titles. Again, select it and say none. Okay, now it looks much better. Awesome, I think I am going to end there. And in the next lecture, we will build a final dashboard. So I'll see you then. Bye.
This video is over. Go to starfreelance.eu to download these videos, materials, and sources. Watch more videos to get premium videos and ebooks. We'll be a Star Freelancer.